I'm a recovering type A individual. And so if it's not perfect the first time, I feel like it's a failure. And I don't like going back and doing it over again. So sometimes if I get frustrated, if I do something the first time and it's not good enough to my perfection standards, I have a tendency to go, what the heck? I don't even want to try.
Have you ever achieved perfection on the first try?
I have never achieved perfection on the first try.
Have you ever achieved good enough on the first try?
I have never achieved good enough on the first try.
Not ever? Really? That was a trick question.
So
every single time you try something, you fail every single time?
So I have a history of no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Okay.
Very frequently, I guess I do good enough on the first try.
Sure.
But I'm a recovering type A individual, and so if it's not perfect the first time, I feel like it's a failure.
Sure.
And I don't like going back and doing it over again. So sometimes if I get frustrated, if I do something the first time and it's not good enough to my perfection standards, I have a tendency to go, what the heck? I don't even want to try.
Yeah.
I don't even want to try again. Don't want to try to improve on it.
Sure. I'm
working on that though. It feels like I'm writing a first draft of something that I'm working on, and then I'm just like, you know what? It should be perfect the first time.
I think a lot of times we expect our first version of ourselves to be the best version of ourselves, which when you really step back and think about that, really is kind of flawed thinking. If you just look at an author, I don't think I've ever met an author, maybe Stephen King, but even Stephen King, the very first draft of a book he'll rewrite, would be my guess. I don't know Stephen King.
Yeah.
But he seems to be able to write books in his sleep. But every author, whenever they write a book, that initial draft feels confident, feels great until you reread it, and then you realize, I got to make some changes here.
Yeah.
And that's when you start to see what you were really trying to say is when you start writing that second draft. And that's kind of the way, the point is, the reason I asked you the question about have you ever achieved perfection the first time, you ever achieved good enough the first time, is life works that way too. Some days we get it right, some days we don't. I
got to make one correction to that.
Okay.
There is one time where I did it the first time and it was perfect the first time. That was when I got married to my wife.
Okay, of course, yes.
That was perfection right there.
The obligatory spousal throwback. No, I'm kidding.
It's true. It's true.
It's true. True for me too. But my point is, we do a lot of us take time to write our beliefs or think about our beliefs, our goals, and our sense of self. But then we kind of assume that those stay the same over time. That's not necessarily true. A lot of times with the passage of time, time itself asks for revisions. And so we kind of live inside these drafts of ourselves. So for example, for a while you were a student, right? You went to high school, then you went to college. That was a student draft of yourself or the student version of yourself. And then to your point, you got married in your young adult life, and then you were the partner version of yourself, right? And then kids came along, and then you were the parent version of yourself. And so each one was right for a time until things changed, right? So you can't stay the student version of yourself forever, because the student version of yourself wouldn't suit the partner version of yourself very well, correct?
Right.
It's
certainly not the father version.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's not to mean that the student version is wrong. It just means it was right for a time and then it wasn't. But we kind of have this mentality that in life, our beliefs and our version of ourselves has to be perfect and right for all of time. And the fact of the matter is we're always revising ourselves. And growth doesn't mean starting over. It's more about kind of drafting that second version of yourself or third version of yourself based on the context or the time of life that you're in. And so all that to say, we have this myth that we perpetuate, I think, that we have to get it right the first time. If we don't get it right the first time, somehow we have failed. And there's a lot of cultural pressure behind that. We have a lot of cultural pressure or a lot of internalized beliefs of perfectionism, for example. Some of us expect things to be perfect the very first time we do them. And if we don't get it right perfectly the first time, somehow we failed. there's some cultural pressure to that. There's also identity rigidity, and that is the person who I am today is a person who I have to be for the rest of time, right? That's called the rigidity of our identity. So our beliefs and our self-perception, we tend to assume shouldn't change, and if it changes, therefore something happened.
I think there's some societal pressures on that too. At least, I mean, I'm not going to get into politics
Sure.
at all. But
Good
one
idea.
thing that I've noticed is that if someone had a certain belief system, for lack of another example, from one side of the aisle, and they're like, you know what, my values are changing.
Yeah.
I'm going to be on a different side of the aisle
Sure.
now. People don't really accept that.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we also have this illusion of finality, which means there's this illusion that once we make a decision, then it is final, and we can't go back and change it. Now, certainly there's some things when we make a decision on that they're final, but a lot of the decisions that we make aren't final, but we perpetuate this illusion of finality, and when we do that, in this sense. We box ourselves in, and we put additional pressure on ourselves to make a decision that has to be perfect the first time around. And so, my point is we're praised in society for being decisive, confident, and certain, right? Mm-hmm. But the reality is that none of us are really confident and certain. We may be decisive, we may make a decision, but a lot of us really aren't confident or certain all the time about every single decision that we make.
Right.
So we celebrate being decisive, confident, certain, but we don't really celebrate this idea of someone who's revising themselves or making decisions, learning as they go, and then making changes to themselves and their identity as they move forward. Sometimes we also mistake conviction for clarity. We feel that if there's strong conviction, therefore that person is clear on what they want to do. And then we rush to print a version of ourselves that feels consistent, even if it's incomplete. And so sometimes that idea of conviction equals clarity isn't entirely accurate. So what I want people to consider is that the first version of ourselves, whether it's the student version, whether it's the kid version or the young adult version, whatever term you want to use to describe your first version, it's just that. It's the first draft of yourself. And so there's always this idea that as we learn, we understand more. And then it's at that point that we continue growing, or to use the analogy that we're using today, the second draft is just as important as the first draft, in my opinion.
That makes sense. I mean, I will say as right now you and I are working on a business plan.
Sure.
For our company, and my first draft, I thought it was great, but when I looked at it again, I'm like, you know what, it definitely needs a lot more changes, a lot more adjustments, and I'm probably going to be adjusting it for probably until the end of the year at least.
Well, of course, yeah.
And then even as we're implementing it, we're probably going to be making quite a few adjustments already. We had a recent opportunity last week that was presented to you, and I thought, oh my gosh, didn't know that this thing was available. Right. That's probably something that we're going to want to incorporate into our business plan. For our next project.
Yeah.
So,
and what's important to understand about the process of revision or revising ourselves, and to use your example of a business plan just for the sake of conversation, rewriting doesn't erase the first draft. It really is more about, it's not about getting rid of what you had before, but it's about exposing what you meant all along, Yeah. And so there's that space between the old and new versions of yourself that you're creating. And it's not that you're erasing the past. It's just you're trying to bring out the best parts of you. And so that's what's really important about understanding, the editing of our lives and of a document for that matter, is you're never going to get it right the first time. It doesn't mean it's wrong, right? Mm-hmm. But you're never going to get it perfect the first time along. And that's why it's important to have the internal ability to reflect and then to make changes based on what you're learning.
Sure.
The thing that's important to know is that the ability to do that is actually related to neuroplasticity. So we've talked about it before, when we've been together, and that is our brain has this amazing ability to rewire and then reinterpret our past. And so every day we live, every day has new experiences, every day has new things to learn from, every day has new encounters, and our brain uses all that information to rewire and reinterpret who we are as people. And so our brain is constantly learning, but for whatever reason, we tend to make an assumption that we as people can't do that, even though our brain is constantly doing that. And it's actually a sign of strength. And again, the idea of neuroplasticity, again, refers to our brain's ability to change and adapt over time. We as people should also do that. We should also allow ourselves to change and adapt over time based on the experiences that we've had.
I've heard that the neuroplasticity of our brain can diminish the older we get. Is that true, or is it just kind of based on how you use your brain or how you exercise it?
I guess I don't have specific stats for that. What I would say is different parts of our brain function differently as we get older. So certainly as we get older, our ability to process information and remember things as quickly as when we're younger deteriorates. But our brain is constantly able to adapt and rewire over time.
Just maybe a little more challenging the older.
Yeah. Now certainly there's some serious diagnoses, Alzheimer's disease, for example, and other forms of dementia that are essentially the opposite of neuroplasticity. You look at a horrible disease like Alzheimer's, that is a disease in which the brain actually regresses.
That's going to be one of the worst diseases to be inflicted with.
And so that's kind of the opposite of neuroplasticity. But at its core, the brain is constantly able to rewire and learn from its experiences. And what I would encourage people to think about is that change rarely comes from replacing things. It more comes from reinterpretation. That's what the brain does. The brain doesn't replace memories that we had in our past. It doesn't replace the information that we've had in the past or that we developed in the past. It reinterprets what it already has in there based on new experiences, new knowledge, and that kind of thing.
Sure.
The other thing is that our brain, when it's learning, that the neuroplasticity that we're talking about, the brain edits through addition. It never, like I said, it never deletes memories or information that it has. It just edits it based on the new information it's received. So in the same way, like as we're developing and working on the second version of ourselves or different subsequent version of ourselves, you never delete your own story. You never forget your past. You never pretend it didn't happen. We spend a lot of time trying to rewrite our past when the reality is we're better off acknowledging the past and using what we learned to move forward. And so you never delete your old story in this sense. Instead, you write something that makes more sense beside it. You make something out of it that's more in context to who you are now. Are you following me so far?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, one I guess one analogy in the field the mental health and substance use field that we're in would be someone who had a lifetime, say, of drug addiction, and substance abuse, and now they were able to achieve sobriety either through themselves or through family members or through going through treatment, and they've been able to rewrite their story. So it's like, they had the addiction, they still have it. But now they're able to rewrite the story and like, hey, I'm sober now and I'm helping others achieve that as well. Whereas in the past, I may have encouraged people to drink, encouraged people to do drugs, even sold people drugs or whatever. They rewrote that story from being a consumer, an abuser of drugs, to someone who advocates for sobriety. And
here's what's interesting, and that's a great example, is for someone in recovery, that second draft, so to speak, of themselves, that second version of themselves is never perfect, right?
Right.
It's just honest. And any person that's been in recovery for a long time, we know people who are in recovery, they've been in it for a long time, they'll never pass for perfect, and I'd be happy to tell them that they're not perfect, right?
Right. And they'll be happy to tell you they're not perfect
but
too.
They're very honest about we're very honest with things. So the second version of ourselves, or the second and subsequent drafts of ourselves, they're never going to be perfect either. They're just more honest, perhaps.
Yeah.
So here's some I was kind of thinking about how can I kind of help people understand where the rubber meets the road with this, so to speak. And so I kind of developed some examples of what a first draft versus a second draft belief might be. So we've all heard of the idea of grit and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, that kind of thing.
Right.
Our first draft of grit may be to push through it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the second draft of grit may be to know when to rest. I think of a friend and coworker of ours, Kevin. He runs, not only is Kevin crazy, but he also runs crazy 100-mile ultra marathon races in Superior.
Kevin, you're crazy.
And he's mentioned it before. The first several times I did it,
Mm-hmm.
The whole point was he had the grit just to push through it. You just push through it to the end. But now, as you talk to him, he talks about preparing for the races and getting ready for it and then participating in it. He says, it's just important to know when to rest as you're moving along in the race. So pushing through was maybe his first idea of how to get through it. But the second draft is probably more insightful, that says, know when to rest.
I just get a kick out of it whenever when we talk at our leadership meeting, he's like, yeah, I ran a race this weekend. Yeah. Oh, well, what race was it? Oh, it was a ultra super mega marathon, 120 some miles. And, I just I hit mile 60 and I'm just kind of like, you know what? I think I'm good for the day. I'm like, holy smokes. If I ran 6 miles, it would be a miraculous feat for myself. But he's got the preparation down.
Yeah. So here's another example of a first draft. So a first draft of love, for example. What was when you were first in your dating scene, and we're not going to talk about any exes or anything, but when you were first on the dating scene, what was the focus of dating and trying to find someone?
I think my focus was to it was actually probably a little bit different.
Okay.
I was like, I need to find a wife right away. I want to find my life partner. I was on a mission.
To find your soulmate.
So
there's only one person in the entire world that is compatible with you.
Only one, Josh. Right? Only one. And I only wanted to date one person. I didn't want to go through the mess of dating a lot of people.
Yeah. But how ridiculous is that, right? It
was unrealistic.
To believe that there's only one person out of, is it there are 8 billion people in the world?
Something like that.
There's only one person out of 8 billion people that would be compatible with you. Now, I'm not trying to minimize our relationships. I love my wife dearly, obviously. She's the one for me, what have you. But that first draft of love is kind of an infatuation type of assumption. That is, I need to find the missing piece, or I need to find my soulmate. But as we mature,
the one that gives me the butterflies,
right? As we mature in our relationships, the second draft would be something more along the lines of to learn to stay whole beside someone, right?
Yeah.
And that really focuses on a more richer, deeper relational aspect rather than just kind of an infatuation. He completes me kind of thing.
The infatuation part, that's just feeling, and like the real love you're talking about, that's an act. That's a intentionality. Yeah. That's work.
What was that movie where it was Tom Cruise that said "You complete me" or something? What was that? What movie was that?
Oh my gosh!
I should have researched that because it popped in my head as I was preparing for this.
I'm drawing a blank. I'll see if I can look it up.
I think it was the one where he was a sports agent or something. I cannot for life remember it. But you remember what I'm talking about. He's like, "You complete."
Jerry Maguire.
Yeah, Jerry. I think it was Jerry Maguire.
1996 rom-com. Jerry Maguire. Tom Cruise's character, a sports agent, declares his love to Renee Zellweger's character with the line, "You complete me."
Yeah. No. So it's it's very cute in rom-coms, right? But think of how kind of damaging that actually is for.
It's a lot of pressure on Renee.
You complete me. That's it's as if to say if that person wasn't there, you would not be a full person. Like that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody.
Yeah.
When you think about it. I mean, I'm not trying to overanalyze a rom-com, but you kind of get my point.
He meant it as like it's a very sweet thing to woo her off her feet,
right?
And really that puts a lot of pressure on the other person.
Yeah, but my point is, you kind of, when we're young, that's kind of how we think our relationship with a significant other is supposed to be. Is like that person's supposed to complete me. They're supposed to be my other half. All those things,
fulfill all my needs.
But as we get older and more mature, and then our relationship deepens, we realize we're actually two separate people in partnership. We may be codependent, which is kind of how relationships work.
Right.
But it's more about learning to stay whole beside someone. So that first draft of love maybe is necessary to garner attraction, but it's not going to sustain a relationship for a long period of time.
Yeah, very good point. Yep.
So, and let's kind of talk about drafts of success for as the final kind of example. We know when we start out in the professional world, the first draft that we believe of ourselves is that we have to prove ourselves or prove yourself, right?
Right.
You got to cut your teeth. You got to, you're green. You got to get your reps in, all that stuff in professional world. You got to prove yourself. But as we develop ourselves over the course of our careers, maybe the second draft will shift to more about not for necessarily from proving yourself, but align with yourself. What are your values for your profession? What are your values for your life? And that's why you see a lot of people that are very successful. You'll see them make a shift from being entirely focused on making money and starting businesses or achieving the pinnacle of success in their profession to more philanthropy work, or more charitable giving, or giving back to other areas,
or not working insane hours every week.
Right. And so they shift from having to prove themselves to aligning with what their values are and what's really important in life.
Right.
And so really what that means is when you're rewriting these versions of yourself, it just means that you've cared enough to get closer to the truth about what you're really striving for. And that's what's really important at the end of the day. All right, so let's kind of maybe in wrapping it up, because I tend to get kind of long-winded, but
this is actually one of our shorter ones.
we're only at 22 minutes.
Yeah, only 22 minutes, man. Short and sweet. That's okay.
Yeah. So I kind of want people to think about revision as being a way of life. Revision from the standpoint of we're constantly changing individuals, and maybe rather than revision, maybe it's better to say growth as a way of life. If we have this mentality that we're always growing, it's going to make sense to us that things change for us over time.
Yeah.
Every morning is a new day, but what's interesting about every morning is that we lived yesterday. And having lived yesterday means we learned something, we developed somehow, we had more experiences, we have more life experiences. And so every morning you wake up and you're kind of in mid-sentence already. You're already in the process. Your brain is already in the process of taking account of what it learned yesterday and all the days before that, and trying to make sense of it. In the same way, we as people develop over time in that regard too. And if we have growth as a way of life, it makes more sense that we'll change over time.
I think that could also really help with when things don't go the way you anticipate.
Yeah,
knowing that it's you're always rewriting your story to a degree.
Yep.
I mean, you're always writing it.
Yep.
And I mean, if it's always linear, well, that's kind of boring, honestly.
Yeah. Yep.
There's no excitement in that. And I mean, no one wants to go through tragedy. No one wants to go through stressful situation. I mean, you and I both know the stuff that we've had to go through with our business. Some of it has been downright scary.
Right.
But it makes us stronger. It helped rewrite our story. It helped us rebalance our business and look at, hey, what do we really want to accomplish instead of coasting?
Right.
Even though going through that, I will never say I enjoy going through those times that we went through.
Sure.
I'm thankful we did, because it really helped refocus what was really important to us and what we really want our mission to be.
And the point here is with life, and not necessarily with work, but just anything in our lives, whether it's our family life, personal life, professional life, what have you. The point of this isn't to start over. The point is to look back at what you've experienced, or look back at what you wrote, so to speak, and then write the next line differently. So rather than focusing on rewriting the past, focus more about writing the next page or the next paragraph differently based on what you learned and what you've been through. I think if we try to start over every time, we're kind of not giving ourselves credit for the growth that we've experienced along the way. And so it's important that you just make changes and adjustments as you go forward based on what you've learned before.
Sure.
So to that end, I also wanted to end by saying we shouldn't be so excited to grow that we discredit what we've got, where we've been.
Right.
Does that make sense? So the first draft or the first version of ourselves got you so far already. Right. And be grateful for that. Be grateful that you had the ability to use the tools you had at the time to get through whatever phase of life you were at. You know, the student, for example, the student version of yourself got you through school, right? The young adult version of you formed relationships. Be grateful for where you've been, and then use that information or use the experiences that we've had to make yourself grow in a positive direction moving forward. And that's where the meaning really lives, is not that you abandon the past, but that you acknowledge the past and then use it as a springboard for future growth.
Right. Couldn't have said it better myself. I know I could not said it better myself, but that was really good, Josh. I really appreciate that. I really appreciate this episode. I think that it's definitely something that anybody who's listening can really benefit from.
Yeah.
So.
Well, just the final takeaway that I want to leave with people is you don't need a blank page to begin again. You just need the courage to make your edits in ink.
In ink.
In ink.